What if God asked you to build a boat with a volume equivalent to 569 standard railroad boxcars? Now, imagine that He asked you to do this thousands of years ago without the aid of modern computer technology, machinery, or prefabricated materials. This is exactly what happened to Noah. It's one of the greatest stories of a man's faith and God's faithfulness in the entire Bible. I wanted to get a better understanding of the sophistication of this ancient boat, so I sat down with the president and CEO of the Creation Museum, Ken Ham, who is an expert on the book of Genesis and one whose ministry, Answers in Genesis, has done a lot of research on Noah's Ark.
And you know, when you think about it, if there was a global flood, which there was, and we see that evidence all over the earth of a global flood, you're going to have a very special type of boat to survive that flood. Because you imagine fountains of the great deep breaking open, there'd be tidal waves, it'd be incredible. You'd have to have a phenomenal seaworthy vessel. And the Bible actually gives us a description of that vessel, you know, in about 500 feet long, about 80 feet wide, about 50 feet high, would have stood about 6 stories, with what we would look at today in regard to buildings. It was a massive, massive boat, and it would have taken a lot of engineering skills to build a ship like that. Well, we actually have an engineer who's working with us. He actually lives in Australia, and he's worked with other engineers who's dedicated his life to really researching Noah's Ark, because we're rebuilding Noah's Ark out of wood, the size of the Ark, not just as a prop, so to speak, but as a real boat, actually, how we think the boat would have been actually built. And he's done an incredible amount of research on that over the years, and he believes just the dimensions that were given to Noah itself, it was a phenomenal seaworthy vessel, that it was actually built to survive the year of the flood.
So to get a better idea of what a boat like this would look like, I took a trip to the Netherlands, where I met a real-life Noah and a life-size replica of Noah's Ark. I'm here in the Netherlands, about 50 miles outside of Amsterdam, and I'm standing in front of Noah's Ark. Well, it's not the original Noah's Ark, but it's about as close as you're going to get unless you find a time machine, because it is a life-size, scale model replica of Noah's Ark that one man built with his family. And when I look at this, the thing that strikes me is the sheer immensity of the size. It's absolutely huge. To think of a man thousands of years ago with primitive tools, with no computers, with very limited understanding of engineering and of mathematics and of science, being able to build something of this size seems quite remarkable. If ever God asked somebody to do something that was impossible, it was Noah. At about 500 feet long, 80 feet wide, and 50 feet high, Noah's Ark would have been an absolutely enormous vessel that not only had to be huge, but also functional and very seaworthy. This was the task that God asked Noah to undertake. Looking at that scale model in the Netherlands, I began to think about what this must have been like for Noah as he was being mocked and ridiculed for his ridiculous project. I wonder if Noah ever felt overwhelmed by the enormity of the assignment God had given him. It was a journey that would have certainly required tremendous trust in God, day by day.
I told you about wood, the gopher wood.
Yeah.
And he has to paint it with tar, with black tar. There was no shop where he can buy it, so he had to make it by himself. So the leftover of the Ark of Noah, he put it outside of the Ark, covered it with sand or clay, and then he put fire inside so you get charcoal. Huh. And because of the heat, the black tar will leak out of the pitch pine. So he used it like a paint, and he distilled it to get pack, like chewing gum. All right? So God told him that time how to make black tar, how to make iron for the nails. God gave the whole explanation. And maybe after 10 years, he didn't know anymore, and he said, God, what do I have to do now? Yeah. And God will give it him, you know.
In the midst of the unknowns, struggles, and difficulties, I wonder if Noah ever questioned the purpose or the significance of his back-breaking, decades-long project. But little did he know, he was building more than a boat. He was building a refuge that would not only preserve his family, but the entire human race and the Messiah himself, who would eventually come through Noah's bloodline. Today, the ark is a monument to God's mercy and a metaphor of salvation itself.
In Genesis 7, for instance, that the ark then stood for 7 days. I like to call that 7 days of grace. And the door was still open. The ark was loaded. I often wonder, you know, when the Bible says Noah's a preacher of righteousness, was he out there at the door of the ark saying, people, there's plenty of room. Come on board the ark and be saved. If you come on board, come through the door. And then the Bible tells us God shut the door. You know, there's an emphasis in the Bible about this door. Think about it. God shut that door. We read in the New Testament about the foolish virgins that were not ready with the oil in their lamps, and the others went in through the door, and then God shut the door. And it's talking about the final judgment. In Noah's day, God shut the door. Then when God's Son stepped into history to be one of us, our relative, a descendant of Adam, he said, I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he'll be saved. And he is our ark of salvation. That's why he died on the cross, raised from the dead. And he said, I offer you a free gift of salvation. In other words, I open the door for you. I want you to come in. And that door is still open today, by the way. And as in the days of Noah, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. That door is open until God brings the final judgment. Then he'll shut that door. That's why it's so important for us to be in that ark of salvation. That's really the message of Noah's Ark, in my opinion. It's really a message to warn people God is a God who judges wickedness and judges sin, but he's a God of grace and mercy. And God provides that way of salvation. So even in his justice in judging sin with death, then he himself stepped into history to pay the penalty by conquering death, to be our ark of salvation and open that door for us to come in. What a message we can preach from the Ark of Noah.
Just think, today Noah's Ark is a picture of Jesus Christ himself. And just as Noah preached righteousness in his generation, his big boat is still preaching to us today. Noah could have never imagined the significance of his impossible project. He could never have fathomed how to build such a gigantic boat. He never would have known how to save humanity. All he knew for sure is that God had spoken, and step by step, Noah obeyed God and became heir of the righteousness, which is by faith. It's true that one of the common characteristics of God's will is that he often calls us to do things that are impossible for us to do in our own strength. But as we yield our lives to him, he causes his divine plans and dreams to become a reality. God takes great pleasure in doing things through us that only he can do, so that in the end, he receives all the glory, honor, and praise.